Hello everyone, I'm Joseph.
And I'm Will.
And today we're going to be talking about our favorite PDH commanders from the new Kamigawa Neon Dynasty set. But before we can actually look at the new commanders, we need to talk about what makes a good PDH commander. First, it must be an uncommon creature. I personally prefer it to be a non-legendary because I think that's kind of a signature of the format. But that's really a personal preference.
Yeah, I'm okay with the legendary, but I mean, to each their own.
Second, we really want to look for repeatability. We want effects that we can trigger over and over again in the course of the game. ETB effects that force you to dedicate a large portion of your deck to re-triggering them can work, but only really in blue and white colors. Third, impact. The creature should have an effect that affects the playstyle. Now, there aren't decks that have been built around creatures like Yargle, but he could honestly be swapped out with any other commander and the deck would play the same. And that's honestly a negative in my book.
Yeah, I feel like the goal of any commander is to really have a unique theme, or at least it feels a little special in some kind of way. Yeah.
And finally, we want to always be on the lookout for setup or payoff effects. We want the effect to cleanly link to other mechanics, and if it has both the setup and a payoff, that's even better. For example, Obelisk Spider. Now moving on to the creatures, we do have an honorable mention. The Go Shintai cycle of cards are the newest iteration of the shrines, and at your end step you can pay a mana for an effect based on the shrine, and that scales with the numbers of shrines that you have in play. The repeatability on these is great, but the problem is that in PDH, you will only ever have one shrine in play. The others just have too high of a rarity.
Yeah, which is really disappointing because I'm very partial to shrines. I do have a regular commander deck that themes the shrine, so yeah, it's really disappointing. But in terms of which shrines to pick, I would say the Go Shintai of Shared Purpose.
Yeah, the Go Shintai of Shared Purpose, which is the white one. It's a 1/3 Vigilance, and at the beginning of your end step, you can pay a mana for a 1/1 colorless spirit token for each shrine you control, which in this case being 1. So for this, you can use a spirit-centric deck or a token-themed deck to really take advantage of those token creatures you're going to be making.
Which it works, but nothing more disappointing than when you're playing your commander and knowing it could have more potential if you built it in a different deck. But, you know, it still does work.
But now on to our actual favorite Kamigawa commanders, not in any particular order.
So I'm going to start off with a little bit of an interesting one I think is really powerful is Naomi, Pillar of Order. So Naomi, Pillar of Order, whenever it either enters the battlefield or attacks, if you have an artifact or an enchantment in play, you generate a 2/2 samurai creature with vigilance. So you basically could pull it into an aristocrat's theme with getting those guaranteed tokens. So something like Demonic Appetite, where you're going to be enchanting your Naomi, getting the enchantment on the board, and then as long as you have another artifact or equipment,
which is going to be like a mana rock. You're always going to have an
need a mana rock, or just something like Explorer Scope. Naomi works on the ETB and it works on the attack trigger. So if you can make him evasive, you can give it something while it's swinging, it's getting a benefit. You're going to slowly develop a board state. So I think Naomi's going to be a really powerful commander in the next couple weeks after Kamigawa gets released.
Yeah, and then those creatures tokens that you're creating are 2/2s, which is already nice, and then they're also samurais with vigilance, and so you can work into all those samurai synergies that are coming out with this set.
Yeah, and you can just use them as the blockers, especially in PDH. 2/2s are a really reasonable defender and attacker.
Another commander that we're looking at is Towashi Guidebot, a 2/1 artifact creature construct for 4 mana. That has, when it enters the battlefield, put a +1 counter on target creature you control. And then you can spend 4 mana and tap it to draw a card, but that ability costs 1 mana less to activate for each modified creature you control.
Yeah, I really like Towashi Guidebot. If I've been trying to make an artifact PDH deck for a reasonable time, and there was never really something that you could really build around that felt, effective. Towashi, great card generation, right? You can throw in cards like Modular that will, as soon as they ETB, they're already a modified creature. You can do things like Clockwork Steed, I thought was interesting, because you're going to just constantly be cycling through the counters on it, and then you can always just, if you're low on cards, you can then start activating your Tawashi.
Yeah, I've actually been looking at those Clockwork cards. I've never really found a good home for them unless you have like some kind of a proliferate deck.
Yeah, and I mean, they could be more powerful, but something like Clockwork Steed, where you just have to do a single tap, and as long as you have the 4 mana, you recharge it to turning into a 4/3. It can be really powerful, and it has some level of unblockability.
Yeah.
So,
another commander that I really like is called Prosperous Thief. It's a 3/2 human ninja for 2 and a blue that has ninjutsu for 2 mana, and it also has whenever 1 or more ninja or rogue creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token. So this puts us in ninja and rogue tribal. And one of the interesting things is that it doesn't actually have to swing itself, which is a big difference from the other ninjas in this set. And when first looking at this ability, it looks like you're only going to get just the 1 treasure every turn.
yeah.
But that's only if you're doing a 1v1. If you are swinging at multiple opponents, then you can get
Upwards of the 3 to 4 treasures, which honestly I wasn't thinking at first,
Exactly.
but it can be really powerful.
Because we have to remember that this is a multiplayer format, and that's going to affect everything.
Yeah.
So one card that I really liked for this is Canal Courier, which is it's a rogue. I think it's about 5 mana, and it gives you the Monarch ability, which is draw effect, which is nice. But also, if it and another creature are swinging at 2 different opponents, then Canal Courier gets unblockable. So you're almost if the other one is evasive, you're almost always going to get 2 treasures every turn. And so this gives you both treasures, so it's ramp in mono blue, and then also you get a bunch of artifact synergies in blue that are just really going to take this thing to the next level.
So I guess my next pick that I thought was pretty interesting is Generous Visitor. So Generous Visitor is a 1 CMC green, and then whenever you cast an enchantment spell, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So, and it's a 1/1. So you could do this kind of Voltron-y. So a couple of really obvious cards to add into this deck are just auras like Snake Umbra and Briar Shield, where you're basically giving a nice pump, giving +3/+3 on the on the Briar Shield if you need to sack it. And I think a really cool aspect about like something like Briar Shield or Carapace is that, yeah, you're going to sacrifice and lose it, but you still got that +1/+1 counter on the creature for 1 green.
Yeah, so you've still got that lasting effect.
Yeah, a reasonable effect. And like, you could then take it with all of the bestow creatures, any enchantment creatures in the game. So no matter if you're doing enchantment auras or enchantments just on the board or enchantment creatures, you're going to be constantly growing your Generous Visitor. And with it being a 1 CMC, it's going to be on the board right away.
Exactly, which you love.
Yeah, right away it's having an impact, and it's a nice incremental snowball effect.
And not to mention, mono green has a huge amount of +1 counter synergies, so this is going to be just a slam dunk.
Yeah,
really. My next pick is Sokinzan Smelter. It's a 2/2 Goblin Artificer for 1 and a red that has at the beginning of your combat on your turn, you can pay a mana and sacrifice an artifact to create a 3/1 red construct artifact creature token with haste. And the thing that really actually surprised me with this is that creature artifact token sticks around. It's not sacrificed at the end of turn. I was blown away when I saw that.
Yeah.
Missing clause.
It's usually that like exile at the end of turn effect, yeah.
So we've got mono red, we've got artifact creatures, we've got artifact sacrifice. This is going to be really good, and there are also 3/1s, so that's a really high power for the rate that you're paying.
Yeah, and the other thing I didn't really think about when I was first looking at the Smelter is you can just integrate several treasure generating cards into the deck, and then as soon as you make those treasures, you're either using them as mana or turning them into 3/1s.
Exactly.
That can be really powerful.
Yeah, treasures, clues,
food tokens,
blood tokens, all of those now can just become a 3/1 every turn on your combat, and you can integrate these with like a reckless Fireweaver effect, or Microsynth Wellspring, which are cards that want to just sit on the field and then need to get sacrificed at some point.
Exactly. enters, draw a card, leaves, draw a card. Right, so
Exactly.
really powerful synergy.
Yeah. What was your next one?
Oh yeah, so I would say the next commander. I'll be honest, I was really happy with the artifacts in this set. Another one that's just insanely powerful for artifacts in uncommon is Patchwork Automaton. So it has Ward 2 for 2 CMC. So at that point, you're entering it ETBs on turn 2. No one can touch it for at least 1 or 2 turns because they can't get past the ward. And whenever you cast an artifact spell, put a +1/+1 counter on Patchwork Automaton. You're in a colorless deck. You're going to be casting artifacts. So I mean, you cast them turn 2. You start slowly on emptying your hand in the next 2 or 3 turns, and you don't even have to do anything Voltron-y on him. You could just do mana rocks. You could do things like Sleeper Dart.
You can just play your deck normally, and it's going to get massive.
Yeah, and it's just the Ward 2 is just so inconvenient because it's technically not hexproof, but I mean. Most removal spells are at least 2 or 3
3 mana.
2 or 3 mana.
So until someone has like 6 mana on the board, they're going to have to choose between either playing their cards or getting rid of your commander.
Yeah, and he's 2 CMC. You cast him again on turn 4 by the time they did target it. You can then replay him, and it's just so punishing at that point. I'm going to say one more commander just because I kind of want to merge them together. In line with that is Runaway Trashbot, which is
No, we already did that one.
No, we did Tosha Guidebot.
Oh, sorry.
So Runaway Trashbot is kind of in the same line where it's a Runaway Trashbot is a trample, gets +1/+0 for each artifact and or enchantment card in your graveyard. You're going to be probably only doing the artifacts 0/4, so for 3 mana. And so with that, you can do, in a similar way, you can do things like Sleeper Dart and all like the eggs cards, so sacrificing. And like, Sleeper Dart enters the battlefield, draw a card, you then stack it. And then, typically you'd lose the benefit of you get that one use, target creature gets tapped and does untap for the next step. But now it gives a nice little +1/+0 to your commander. And that's going to be slow rolling the whole game.
Every kind of bauble that exists in the game exists
like
in this.
Armillary Sphere.
They all work in this deck.
Yeah, and it's just, it's so nice and incremental.
Moving away from artifacts, one that I like, Will doesn't really like this one so much, is Dokuchi Silencer. So it's a 2/1 human ninja for 1 and a black that has ninjutsu for 2 mana, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you can discard a creature card. When you do, destroy target creature or planeswalker that player controls. So it does have to make contact, but once you do, it is a repeatable discard and repeatable removal. So you can really look at madness effects, and you can really look at cards that care about other creatures dying, which were in mono black. So that it's full of cards that care about that.
Yeah, I think my biggest concern, right, with any of the ninjutsu cards is they have to be in your hand to do the ninjutsu activation. So if you're pairing it with several other ninjas that you can then bounce it back to your hand and then have a couple evasive creatures, some 1/1 Thopters in play, you can it could be really useful.
Which admittedly black is not the best for bouncing.
Yeah, and
so this one is a weaker one, but I liked some of the.
It is interesting having a recursive removal effect, and you're not going to need it all the time, right? You're only probably going to want to hit big, like those 1 or 2 big creatures, and if it's either going to dump something useless in your hand like a land. To then turn that into a removal spell. Right?
No, it has to be a creature spell. It has to be a creature that you discard, which is going to make it a little trickier for the build around, but it's...
Yeah. With ninjutsu, you're going to be bouncing into your hand at that point anyway, so it's either... They kind of turn into death touch 1/1s almost in your hand, because basically if they're going to be blocking it, they lose it anyways.
Yeah, so it is going to be a little interesting, it's going to be a little trickier, but I think it has a lot of potential.
Yeah. So still in line with black, I would say another good commander from this set is Dockside Chef. So it's pay 2, sacrifice an artifact or creature, draw a card. In Pauper, being able to draw is king. So I think that goes without saying. So
it is always the struggle.
yeah,
Always.
Ichor Wellspring, like we just said. And then, so you can either pick a lane, right? You could either go pure artifact route and do a lot of artifact sacrifice, artifact recursion.
One that works really well with this strategy is Disciple of the Vault. So every time that you're sacrificing an artifact, you're also gaining a life.
Yeah, which can be really good. And then on the flip side, you can do things like Death Greeter, which is every time an artifact creature dies. So not only yours, and honestly, Death Greeter is a really powerful card. If you're not putting that in all of your black decks, it's like
you're kneecapping yourself.
Not Soul Attendant. It's basically the opposite. I think of Soul Attendant, where it's whenever another creature enters the battlefield, you gain one life. This whenever one dies, you're gaining the life. So it's really useful in that sense. And so I think that's going to be a pretty powerful commander in the format.
Yeah. Moving on to our first multicolored commander is Asari Captain.
Second multicolor.
Yes,
right. Second.
Because of your legendary.
Yeah.
First multicolored non-legendary commander is Asari Captain, a 4/3 human samurai for 3 red/white. So it has haste, and it also has whenever a samurai or warrior you control attacks alone, it gets +1/+0 until end of turn for each samurai or warrior you control. So this will give an exalted effect for any one samurai or warrior. It is a little odd because it can't really decide if it wants to go wide or if it wants to go tall. But it is going to give a very significant pump. And personally, when looking at this, I would focus more on warrior tribal.
There's just more options.
Yeah. So there's one card, Mud Button Clanger, that's going to be really good for card advantage. It's going to give you the ability to look at the top card of your deck to see if it is also a warrior, and then you can draw it. I think it's got that kinship ability. And then you have another creature, Brighthearth Banneret, that's going to give you a mana reduction on all of your warriors.
Yeah, and I think, this is tribal deck, but you can also see it's pretty easy to just lean into the Voltron-y aspects of it because it encourages just to attack with the Asari Captain, right? And so you can also pair it with like Whisper Silk Cloak and other artifacts that are purely geared towards a single creature.
If I can make a comparison to EDH, this actually reminds me a lot of Minsk, the Ranger from the Forgotten Realms set, where it's like a pseudo Voltron commander where you're taking another creature you have and Voltroning that other creature, but not your commander itself.
You are right, and that is a fair point, because as long as you get one of these warriors or samurais to be evasive, you just need one to squeak through, and then having that nice Anthem-esque effect it could be really powerful. Yeah, so I think these are a bit of, I wouldn't say honorary mentions, but Enthusiastic Mechanaut and the Jukai Naturalist.
So they basically play the same, but for different themes. So Enthusiastic Mechanaut is a 2/2 artifact creature goblin artificer for a blue and a red that has flying, and artifact spells you cast cost 1 mana less to cast.
Yeah, and then the Jukai Naturalist is in same lane with that as lifelink, and enchantment spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. I think this is cool, right? You can make a commander off of him. You can use some of the more heavier end enchantment or artifact spells you won't typically get to use.
They're pure value, but they're just very blasé.
And I think the biggest problem with it is, there's several legendary, rarer cards that have similar effects that also pair it with the draw ability. So what I'm really concerned with is you're going to be just emptying your whole hand and having no way to bring more cards into your hand. So yeah, you could get that 1 mana cost reduction and toss 3 or 4 things onto the battlefield, and that's it, right? Yeah,
and so you cast the things, you get them out a little earlier, and then what? They're good. They're unquestionably good, but they're not interesting.
I agree they're probably not interesting. And the other thing too is you could really say is with the Enthusiastic Mechanaut, he really lends himself to Voltron, right? He already has an evasive ability to him. And so now all of those artifacts that you're going to equip him with are now 1 mana cheaper. You know, that is fair, I guess. But
and because they're artifacts, he could have pretty reliably reduced cheap artifacts like down to 0 for initial cost.
Yeah, to completely empty and then equip.
Yeah, so you can dedicate all of your mana to equip costs rather than the casting cost.
Yeah. In line with artifacts, I would then say our next commander is a little bit more interesting. I would say pretty powerful, is Replication Specialist. So Replication Specialist is a 5 CMC flying. Whenever a non-token artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 2, a colorless and a blue. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that artifact, 3/4. You're basically playing with Mirrorworks as your commander.
Which is nuts. It's so nuts.
Yeah, and so, I mean, you can do a lot of different stuff with this. I mean, obviously, the one thing you can really just do is all your mana rocks, you just double them, and then you can have a lot of control.
Yeah, and then you just play every huge artifact creature that you want, and then double those.
Yeah. Mana rocks, counter spells, big 8/8s.
Big 8/8s.
Yeah.
I mean, it
is good. It is, I mean, and you know, with a 5 CMC creature, it's big enough that once it enters the battlefield, you're probably going to have enough mana to consistently activate its ability.
And it's a 3/4, which means it's out of like the range of a simple burn spell. You're not going to be able to remove this thing easily, and it also has flying, so you could double up on
you
equipment.
You could make it Voltron-y too. Like
and it's in blue rather than colorless, and blue has a lot of artifact support.
Yeah, and just the protection. Yeah, you really could just do mana rocks. Equipments are big artifacts, and just protection counter spells. You know, so it's
strong.
It has legs.
It's possibly the strongest.
Blue, definitely probably strongest blue commander.
Definitely strongest blue. I would say top 3 strongest PDH commanders from this whole set.
Probably from this set, I would say that's pretty fair. Yeah.
Yeah. I would like to mention a very fun card, Silver Fur Master. So this is a 2/2 Rat Ninja for a blue and a black. And what it has is ninjutsu for blue and a black, but we don't really care about that. But ninjutsu abilities you activate cost 1 mana less, and also other ninja and rogue creatures you control get +1/+1. I'm going down right now. This is a better ninja lord and a better ninja commander than the actual EDH ninja commanders of Yuriko or Satoru Umezawa. This actually cares about ninjas.
Yeah, I agree. I know. I think we've talked about it before. It encourages actually integrating ninjas with ninjutsu into your deck. So it's pretty powerful.
It's very powerful, and also these tribes work together so well because rogues are just really evasive. Ninjas need someone evasive. It's perfect.
Yeah.
It's a match made in heaven.
It's a pleasant combo.
Or a match made in the shadows. Yeah. Also, it is a Master Splint reference. It's Master Splint reference. You've got to love that. You didn't get that?
No, I didn't.
It's a great. It's just so great.
Yeah.
And I think this might be our final one.
Yeah.
And it's Unforgiving One, which is a 2/3 spirit for 2 and a black. It has menace, and whenever it attacks, you can return target creature card with mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the number of modified creatures you control. I mean, it's everything you could want.
Especially in PDH, dude. The recursion is great. I mean, you can do Unforgiving One as a aristocrats theme, right? With just a little bit of modification in play.
Yeah, it has evasion, but it doesn't even trigger on damage. It triggers on the attack. So you could just swing into a wall of blockers and still get the value.
And just toss in and get a couple and keep repeating like a burglar rat. You know, you could just you could just annoy your opponents and just remove their options from their hand.
Yeah, and the modified aspect is so versatile. I mean, you could be doing equipment, you could be doing counters, you could be doing enchantments. Black has decent support for all 3. You could pick any one of these things.
And you don't need that many. like I said, your curve is probably gonna be around 3 on the top end. So as long as you have like 1 artifact, a +1/+1 counter somewhere else, like 3 creatures on board, you're gonna have them all modified. It's going to be a really easy ask. So.
And it's so flexible. I think any one of these other commanders, and particularly in PDH for a strong commander, you don't get nearly as much flexibility. Yeah. This one is so flexible.
Yeah, and the menace, man. The evasion on him, making it really inconvenient for people to block, is going to be punishing to get that constant graveyard recursion. I mean, it's really nice. A main phase, you sack something, swing, you get it back, do it again next turn.
Exactly, and it's any permanent too. So it could be the ETB creatures like you were talking about. It could be Eggs Commander. It could be some of these nasty enchantments that like to sacrifice themselves for effects. You could go so many directions with this. I'm just in awe because no 2 decks with this commander are going to look the same.
Yeah, it gives you a lot of flexibility. I like the modified. I like it. It's a broad range of things you can do to the creatures to just get the checkbox of it's okay. It doesn't really tunnel you into a narrow hole of every creature with a counter or every creature that's equipped. I really like having a bit of a broader modification to the creatures to trigger an ability.
Yeah, and I think that's our last one, right?
Yeah, that's our last one.
Yeah, so those are our favorite commanders from the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty block for PDH.
Yeah.
We've got some really strong options, and I think that you guys will have a lot of fun building around them, and hopefully we'll build a couple decks around them too.
Yeah. So let us hear your opinions. If our insights are garbage, or if you notice cards that you thought might have an interesting effect that we scanned over. So thank you. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.
All right. Have a good night.